Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our Q2 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session.
Hey there guys, welcome back to another deck profile with yours truly, Paul Reisman. Today we are taking a look at my Seer Christie list that I piloted here on the channel. This is a list that I got from Derrick Mugwaneza, who got top 4 in GP Minnesota recently, and I just thought this was one of the coolest decks that I had seen at the event. There were a lot of really interesting things going on with Seer ever since we got some new cards from Pilgrim Memories that were spoiled with her. She's had a lot of really interesting things, the most of which being her Trials from Kaguya. Anytime you destroy a Resonator or a J Resonator, you get to search your deck for a treasury item, and you also get an EX deck of treasuries. All of those are going to be down here, and I'll talk about those in just a second here. But what's so good about this is you don't always have to look in your main deck. You can also look in your EX deck for your treasures. So there's a lot of really interesting things that you get to do now that your EX deck is just crafted. It can basically be any sort of deck you need it to be against the metagame. So there's some really interesting treasures in this, and I'm pairing this with Christie. Derrick Mugwaneza played this because basically this is an extra draw, and you have such strong draw power in this deck in general that you're going to be able to activate Christie several times throughout the game. If need be, you can flip over into Helsing. She's a 10/10 that enters and destroys a non-human J/Resonator. And destroys it in the end phase. It also loses all abilities, which is really, really nice, right? Just blanks the thing and it dies in the end phase, which is really, really fun. My treasures for the deck are going to be Magical Wind Chime. This is one of Derrick's original cards. This is really solid, especially when you're able to destroy something, and then you can just use this will to pay for any number of different cancels that you have in the deck. There are several, which I'll get into, but this card was really good for just having extra will. Miracle Millennium Medicine is here to be able to say, hey, we're going to recycle things back into the deck, including itself. In most cases, you're using this to recycle any of your treasuries that get destroyed, or if you just need a particular card back in your deck, this card is really helpful for that. Pictorial Scroll is a draw 3 more cards. Congratulations, you've drawn 3 more cards. The fact that you get it for free is really good. This card was not really playable before, but it certainly is now because you can just play it from your EX deck for free. First Moon is also in the deck, and this is really good for just protecting your other treasuries and a couple of other additions you have in your main board. And then the one card that I played instead of Derrick's, I think he played the Jewel Tree to come in and draw you an extra card and block. That was really great, but you know, I go to locals, and so there's a lot of fire decks at locals, and I decided to play Robe of the Fire Rat. I believe you saw this in my game. It's gotten some new text, so Fire J Resonators can have their damage prevented by this card, which is really, really nice. So it was able to blank the damage from Little Red very often, especially after Judgment. To my horror, this does not hit Aristella once he's contracted because he's not a fire J ruler. He is only a light J ruler. So I had to learn that on the fly as I was playing through those games with Logan. But this card is really good in the against the aggro matchup, as it should be. This is a classic Force of Will card from way back in Grim Cluster. So this card actually went a long way. Moving on to the main deck, we're playing 4 Alberic, King of Elves. This card is very solid. He does buff himself, +2/+2 for each elf you control. Look at that, Alberic is an elf, wouldn't you know? So he's actually coming down with some pretty decent stats. When he comes in, the Enter effect pulls a Resonator from your opponent's hand, puts it onto the field, they lose all abilities, and they become a 1/1. Very solid card. It also has Belligerence, Precision, and Pierce, so it's going to be able to kill that Resonator relatively easily, and because of his stats, he is going to survive any time that you attack into those 1/1s. So this is kind of one of the mainstay cards of the deck. This is the reason you're playing Christie, is you get access to Alberic. You also get access to Elvish Archer, which is another really good way of blanking something and making it a 1/1 until the next end of your turn. So this is not just You can do this on your opponent's turn, and it's a 1/1 going into your turn, which is really, really helpful. And then whenever an elf J resonator you control destroys a non-human J/resonator, you can buy this back from the graveyard. So you only really need a couple of them. You're also playing Hunter's Area. I personally call it Hunter's Mark because I played Dungeons & Dragons, as I'm sure many of you do as well. But Hunter's Area has a lot of different abilities. First, when it enters the field, you can put a resonator from either graveyard into the field under your opponent's control. It loses all abilities until end of game. And if you do, you may put an elf resonator with total cost 3 or less from your hand into the field. It gains belligerence until end of turn, so your elves are able to kill other things that your opponent now has. I believe that I completely blanked on this. It loses the all abilities until end of game at a couple of times, just because there is so much text on this card. Whenever an elf J/resonator I control destroys a non-human J resonator, I draw a card. At the end of my turn, if I control an elf J ruler, I may choose one. Return an elf resonator I control to the owner's hand. Put an elf J ruler you control into its owner's ruler's area as a ruler. So I'm sure I definitely missed these effects as well. These are just really good bonus effects. And then you can make anything you want into a chosen race and an attribute until end of the turn. But if you have your Helsing, you can make that thing become a 1/1 until end of turn as well. And you can only do this during your main timing. So this is one of those cards that is going to be infamously difficult to remember all the effects of. So I'm sure that in the game I missed some of these pretty optimal prime effects, but I'm planning on playing this deck quite a bit. This deck seemed to just be very, very interesting in terms of how it was able to execute its plays, and so this is going to become more and more interesting as time goes on, the more practice I get with this. The addition as well, you can't really see it because of how the art overlays with the text here, but this is also an elf, which means that your Alberic will also get a buff off of that, and its cost will also be reduced, which is really, really helpful, because it doesn't care if it's an elf resonator or elf J resonator or whatever. It just cares for each elf you control. So even if you had a magic stone, this thing would be reduced. If that magic stone was an elf, it's really helpful for that reason. So Alberic, very, very good. Hand ripping, blowing things up, getting bonus effects, really, really solid. You also get to play Lorite because Lorite's an elf, and so there are moments in which your Lorite is probably going to be able to under Hunter's Area, just be able to kill something under the right circumstances because of that stat line, which is really helpful. Otherwise, he's just a really good utility, cancel, activate, or automatic ability your opponent controls, which is really helpful. We have 3 Girion to negate 1-drops and blow things up. Blowing things up in this is very, very relevant because you definitely get a search off your trials. Replicant Kaguya is very live in this deck. We are playing Swords of Progression, and we're removing things from our graveyard from the game very often, including our own Girion. Once it goes to the RFG, you're able to recycle it for solarization. You're also able to recycle other cards to make Moonwill to activate this cancel target automatic ability that she has on the bottom. And she's, decent 8/7. That's certainly not bad stats by any means, and she's quick cast as well. Very helpful. So I'm going to locals, and I wanted to play Fair. One of the main cards that we're talking about in the format needing to get banned right now is Conflict. And so Fair's spell for me was just a way of saying, like, what can the deck do in the event that Conflict does get banned? Fair's spell is the easiest replacement, so I just put that in. Swords of Progression, you're never making Genesis Chrono Gear, but you are drawing cards, bouncing cards, canceling target spells, and these cards do get removed for your Replicant Kaguya, which is really helpful. 4 Killua Girl in the City to blow up additions, draw you extra cards in a pinch, and then be able to stop automatic abilities, which are everywhere in the game. We are playing 3 Liberation of the Winds. This card is very solid in the event that you have cards removed, or you have one of these in hand and one of these in graveyard. This card itself pays for another liberation, at least half of another liberation, which is really, really helpful. And then because you quote-unquote solarize this card, it cannot be chased, which is a really good way of getting around certain effects that would be able to say, like, give things eternal, etc. So this card is very solid for that. We're playing 2 attack order because Abdul exists. It just needs to die. That's all I gotta say. Attack order, it exists. Girl Staring At, just as a one of, we have another one in the sideboard of this particular list, and then One Muses Staring At is also a one of in the main, another in the sideboard. I didn't include the sideboard because I don't really have one at locals. I just sort of bring things with me, but Derrick in the actual GP played a second copy of both in his side. We're playing one Zeus Alice because guess what? She's a treasury item, and she's also an elf, and she's a 3-drop elf at that, mixed with the Kingdom of Diversity Light Palace to just say, hey, I'm a 30,000 swing game. And usually that happens. I was playing one game at locals. Oh my gosh, like just being able to see this in my opening hand or off a pictorial scroll, I was able to just close out the game before time was called, and that was an aggro deck. All of a sudden, this is very much a control deck, but this deck just decided to, I'm going to play aggro now because of Kingdom of Diversity Light Palace. Very funny. Magic Stone deck is I'm playing Grim Ruler, so I get Pure Heart Stone. I also play a couple of Moonshades, just like Derrick. Secret Stone to foresee, as well as Secret Stone of the Chaos Moon. And then one Amadeus Holy Crystal to round out my Omni Stone lineup. Card's very good. And then from outside the game, you're playing your classic Rogue and Shiva. So guys, let me know what you think of Derrick's list. I just made a few changes. There's not a whole bunch of other stuff going on with this deck. It's almost, actually it's just a carbon copy of Derrick's list with a couple of exceptions, including the Fair spells and the Robe of the Fire Rat. But other than that, this deck was super fun. I encourage you to try it for yourself. And with all of that being said, guys, this has been Paul with another deck profile. Class is dismissed.